Welcome to Elevate, the masterclass where we dissect the elements of exceptional achievement and lifestyle design with a focus on personal growth and real estate investing. Now, here's your host, Tyler Chesser.
Elevate Nation, welcome back. This is Tyler Chesser. I'm so thankful to have you here, and I'm blessed and grateful to be sitting with Greg McKeown today. Greg McKeown is the New York Times bestselling author of Essentialism, and his new book, Effortless, is coming out very, very soon. So really excited to sit down with this prolific author, this prolific thinker, prolific communicator and speaker, and such an amazing individual. And anybody who has read the book Essentialism knows that it is a game changer. And you'll recognize that many of the highest performing people across the world, they know how to say no better or more than saying yes, right? They say no more than they say yes, because they know what their purpose is. They know what they are looking to accomplish. They know what their unique genius is, and it allows them to only focus on the essential. And I know that we're going to take it to another level today, even beyond that, because the newest book that Greg's coming out with is Effortless. And my goodness, what an inviting title. If you think about it, in today's day and age, the complexity that we all, perceive the world to have, effortless sounds like a really interesting endeavor. And how can we make everything that we're doing more effortless? How can we reach our goals in a more effortless capacity? How can we live a life of fulfillment, live a life of purpose, and, leave a legacy in an effortless capacity? How exciting does that sound? And so we're really going to dive deep on this today. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with Greg McKeown. And I want to ask you the question that I always ask: are you ready to take it to another level? I have no doubt we're going to be doing that today. I want to welcome you back to the show where we sit down for mind-expanding conversations with influential authorities in real estate, as well as top experts in other industries and disciplines. This is for leaders, entrepreneurs, and real estate investors who have a burning desire for the extraordinary. And of course, it is our mission to identify and apply how the best of the best raise the bar personally and professionally to achieve greatness in real estate and beyond. And of course, it is about the application, right? It's about identifying, let's draw out that genius, but most importantly, let's apply, right? So that's our mission. So this is the community we can identify, and we can also apply to our own lives, to our own businesses, what makes the most sense for us, right? Because it is about application. It's also about course correction as well. So be looking for those opportunities to apply. What can you do to listen today and actually go out there and improve the way that you act, improve the way that you communicate, improve the way that you make decisions? And that's how you're going to get the most value from Elevate Podcast. We will, of course, distill the mindset, the habits, the routines, the tools, the systems, the strategies, and so much more from Greg McKeown, so that you can elevate your life to the next level, so that you can elevate to a life without limits, right? Because that's what it's all about. And the only limits that we have are what we place on ourselves and our mind. And I hope that the more that you listen to this podcast, you start to recognize that we have a story going on in there. Is it limiting us or is it empowering us? And of course, there's so many tools. There's so many different tools that we can apply towards strategy, right? Towards strategy of living a life of abundance, of living a life, of limitless capacity. And all of those strategies are out there. So model success, because as Tony Robbins says, success leaves clues. This is a masterclass for leaders and those looking to achieve uncommon results and purposeful outcomes through personal growth, personal mastery, real estate investing, other business ventures, most importantly, and ultimately in their lives. If you're enjoying the show, thank you, first of all, for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We invite you to subscribe to the show, give us a rating and a review. It's extremely helpful for us, and it's something that our team deeply appreciates. And, at the end of the day, it helps us rank better in terms of the algorithms that are out there on whatever podcast platform you're listening to, so that we can reach a larger audience, so that we can attract guests like Greg McKeown. And so we definitely appreciate you rating, subscribing, and sharing with a friend. If this is your first time listening, the fee towards listening to Elevate Podcast is literally only to share this with someone else. Pay it forward and let them know that, hey, you might actually see some opportunity to expand, to elevate by listening to Elevate Podcast. So pay it forward, share this with one person. If you want to share it with your network on social media, we invite you to do so as well. And with all that said, I'd love to dive in here and introduce you to Greg McKeown, who has dedicated his career to discovering why people and teams break through to the next level and others don't. And this is the perfect person to have this conversation with today. The definitive treatment of this issue is addressed in McKeown's New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less, as well as frequently being the #1 time management book on Amazon. This book challenges core assumptions about achievement to get to the essence of what really drives success. McKeown is the CEO of McKeown Inc. Clients include Adobe, Apple, Google, Facebook, Pixar, Salesforce.com, Symantec, Twitter, VMware, and Yahoo. His writing has appeared or has been covered by the New York Times, Fast Company, Fortune, HuffPost, Political, and Inc. magazine. He is among the most popular bloggers for the Harvard Business Review and LinkedIn's influencers group, averaging 1 million views a month. McKeown has been interviewed on numerous television and radio shows, including NPR, NBC, Fox, and as a regular guest on the Steve Harvey Show. Entrepreneur voted his interview at Stanford University the #1 must-see video on business, creativity, and success. And of course, Essentialism was voted by Goodread as the #1 leadership and success book to read in a lifetime. Wow, that's amazing. And so much more. I mean, he's an accomplished public speaker. He's spoken to hundreds of audiences around the world, including Australia, Bulgaria, Canada, China, England, India, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Singapore. I mean, you get the picture. This is an individual who is a big time contributor in many different capacities. So we're blessed and grateful to have the opportunity to speak with Greg McKeown today. So I invite you to enjoy this amazing podcast discussion with the one and only Greg McKeown. Greg, welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
It's great to be with you, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I've got to, make a quick plug to the audience because I'm really excited about, not only having you on the show, but I've got to encourage the audience to go subscribe to the What's Essential podcast right now before we dive into this conversation, because, first of all, we're sitting down together and I just appreciate you. I appreciate your work. But I wanted to encourage the audience to do that because there's a way for the audience to not only get an introductory of you if maybe they're not familiar with you, but they can go dive deeper, not only into your work, into your mind, but, it's right there on the podcast app. So I wanted to just start with that. But Greg, I just want to welcome you to the show. And if you have an opportunity to share a little bit more about yourself, sort of behind the public image, behind the bio, all that stuff, that would be great if you don't mind.
Oh, that was so nice of you, Tyler. Thank you. It's been a pleasure doing the What's Essential podcast. And one of the reasons I've liked it is for what your first question is, which is people who've got a chance to see a little more. The very first episode, in fact, was with my wife, Anna, and about the story behind essentialism, like the birth of essentialism from her point of view, because, the one of the key points at which I came to essentialism was in a failed moment of failure, where I had got an email from my manager at the time, said, look, Friday between 1 and 2 would be a very bad time for your wife to have a baby. And there we were Friday morning, we're in the hospital, our daughter's been born in the early hours. And instead of being focused on the most essential thing, the priority, I still have my phone out. I still got my laptop out. I'm trying to keep everybody happy and I'm trying to do it all. And so I went to the meeting, and afterwards, even I remember my manager saying, look, the client will respect you for the choice you just made. And the look on their faces didn't evince that sort of respect. But even if they had, it was clear to me, and is now in hindsight, that I'd made a fool's bargain. And what I learned from that was, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. But what's interesting with the podcast, I was a little hesitant to even do it in a sense, was that we just had this sort of almost live conversation with my wife's point of view about that experience, what it was like for her, what she learned, what she felt about all of this. And so, this is one of the reasons I think podcasting is such an amazing medium, is because you can really have these conversations. And it's now typical that it happens, that people will reach out and say, will talk to me about something. Oh yes, how's this going? How's that going? And I find it's like, how do you even know about that? And it's of course because they're listening to these conversations and they feel very private, but of course everyone is part of it. So anyway, that's part of the story behind the story.
Yeah, and I love that too. And it's important for people to be able to connect with those type of stories. And I know that I can relate in so many ways. I mean, I haven't been in that exact circumstance, but we always, in many ways, and certainly modern society, and the more success you experience professionally, the more that you're kind of lured into this trap, right? This trap of non-essentialism in many ways, right? And it's interesting because I would imagine that many of our listeners can relate to the feeling of, well, I've got a really important life event going on, but I've also got important things that are going on in my business. And I've also got other desires and things that I've been told by society that I should be looking to accomplish as well. And you're pulled in 7 directions at one time. And so almost that moment, that you experienced, going back, obviously it's, I would imagine in some ways it was a kind of a painful memory, but also it created this path for you to really dive into, well, how can I create these priorities? How can I, develop my own values hierarchy, so to speak, and, start saying no to things, right? Is that, if you reflect back on the moment, is that sort of the gift in that?
Yes, I think that is true, and it's an ongoing process. The challenge. I was just on a walk with Anna this morning, and one of the things that she was talking about, she's giving a presentation on essentialism, and she was really trying to sort of express why she thinks people get pulled into non-essentialism. And she says for a lot of people, and she is her opinion, maybe particularly women, get pulled into it because of fear. There's a fear of missing out, of FOMO, but there's many other kinds of fear. A fear that if I don't do this thing, my child will not have the opportunity that we want for them, and we want their lives to be exceptional too. But I think she has a great point, and I think that fear can drive even successful people. In fact, for sure, fear can drive otherwise successful people because they have something to lose. And the more you have to lose, the greater the fear can be, in fact. And so I think it is interesting to try and think about not just how to become successful, which, there's a lot that's written about that. There's a lot that's been studied, but what to do once you are. And essentialism is really specifically written for what you need to do once you are successful.
Yeah. And it's almost like one of those things too, where, it can allow you to reach greater levels of success. It's almost like, you think of a rose bush. I always think of this. You think of a rose bush, and if you want a rose bush to grow and be more, fruitful, for lack of a better term, you prune, right? You go out there and you cut, off the dead buds, right? And it allows and it gives it more space to grow and perhaps to step into more of your zone of genius, right? What are you designed and destined to do? But it really resonates to me, you talking about fear, right? Because sometimes you find yourself, or if you check in with it, or I know I do myself, I check in with, hey, I'm really busy and I'm doing a lot of things. And the question is that busy, inadvertent or, non-thought out action or indiscriminate action and lazy thinking? Or have I really thought through what are the action steps I'm taking? So I think that really resonates with me and thinking about, well, wait a minute, have I really thought about, if I give myself some space, maybe I'll experience some fear, but perhaps I can step into the greater destiny that I have. So anyway, but Greg, I really appreciate that. And I actually wanted to, believe it or not, I wanted to go through a couple tweets that you had put out recently. And one of which is actually pinned to your Twitter profile. And I loved this. You said, burnout is not a badge of honor. And, what do you mean by that? It really struck me, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts behind that statement.
That's it. That's a really great question. I've given you sort of a story here in this conversation about the birth of essentialism. And this is a little weird because in a way that what you just asked is about the birth of what I've been doing since writing Essentialism. So essentialism has become a bit of a movement. globally, and of course there's lots of work left. It's been this amazing experience. It changed everything for me personally. Once this came out, it was like a blur. Traveling all over, speaking at events. Went to one event, just literally 300 people around the shop. They sell out the books, never happened before. That was life. And in addition to being the father of essentialism, I was also by this point the father of 4 children. And so I am being more selective at this point than I have ever been, right? And that's like the core of essentialism, is to be selective and thoughtful, to do less but better. And I was trying to apply that. But I still found myself still with a problem. And in fact, one time when I was traveling, working with these entrepreneurs, and someone brings up, and you've heard it, and everybody listening, I'm sure, has heard it as well, the big rocks theory, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? You already know, don't you? Tell me what it is, just so that I'm not monologuing.
Yeah, I'm picturing in my mind a jar, right? And I've got materials to the left of the jar. You've got a big rock, you've got pebbles, and you've got sand, right? So
right.
And the only way you're going to fit all those in is if you put the big rocks in first and let the pebbles and the sand fill the small spaces around it. But if you do it backwards, you're not going to be able to fit in all the materials.
You nailed it. It's exactly what it is. And as I was talking with these entrepreneurs, I'm traveling, I just start to think, but what happens if you have too many big rocks? Like, the metaphor only goes so far. What happens if your primary responsibilities are themselves too much? They don't fit in the jar. What do you do then?
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm having this thought, traveling, I get a call from my son, but he's on my wife's phone, which definitely got my attention. Doesn't normally do that. And it's a video conference, and he looks panicked. He's white face, just pale face, I should say. And he's trying to explain something. Eve, she was eating, then something happened, and I can hear my wife just turn the phone around so he can see what's happening. And what is happening is that my one of my daughters, Eve, is having a massive clonic seizure. And so suddenly I'm in this situation where I'm already being highly selective, already feeling like there are too many rocks, big rocks, important things that matter, that I want to do. But I also now have this significant challenge, this crisis, really. I won't get into all of the backstory to this, but what was happening there was the beginning of a massive discombobulation of her capabilities. It wasn't like just a one-off thing, or it was effectively the loss of personality, of temperament, and no diagnosis whatsoever. So I am now being tested beyond my previous understanding in a whole series of ways. And I came out of this with first of all, an awareness, like, wow, what got you here isn't going to get you there. Like that you're going to have to learn something new, a whole new way of operating, because you still want to make a bigger contribution in life. You still want, but you are way beyond capacity. I even said to my wife at one point, and I didn't want to say this, right? I'm the I wrote Essentialism. I don't want to have to say, which I did. Look, Anna, I'm not well. Yeah, it's just all so much too much. And what I learned from that experience really was this, which is that I was doing the right things, but doing them in the wrong way. Right? I was like a weightlifter who's lifting, with my back. I'm like a baker trying to knead all of the dough by hand instead of by a machine or something. Like that matters. Essentialism is about doing the right things, figuring those few vital, few essential, important, critical things this new approach, I just am calling Effortless. It's the name of I managed to codify this whole experience in this, what I've learned in a new book called Effortless. Essentialism is about the right things, effortless about doing them in the right way. And I just feel like there's something so relevant about this now. I actually got quite emotional thinking about it. One, because of where it grew from and the experiences that led to it, but also because given what has happened since beginning this book, I mean, I was writing this book before pandemic, before COVID, before anything, but what's happened since then is that everyone is effectively, vast majority of people, maybe 85% of people are in a similar position as I was, which is they're just feeling there's just too much responsibility. These are things that all matter, but I've got family at home now. I'm trying to work from home now. I've got pivoting that's needed to happen in the business. There's all these things. And I've spent a year trying to deal with it in the way I used to deal with it. So I'm using up deep reserves. And so we come to this point, and this is who the book is really to, is to high performers who are on the edge of exhaustion. And I think that a lot of people watching or listening to this, given your audience, know exactly what I'm talking about.
Hey guys, just a quick word from our sponsor and we'll be right back to the show. This episode of Elevate is brought to you by CF Capital, and you know how much I love real estate and how it can be a vehicle towards creating any outcome that you want in your life, which is really why we created CF Capital. It's a real estate investment firm that focuses on acquiring and operating multifamily assets that provide stable cash flow, capital appreciation, and a margin of safety for our investors, for our partners, and for the people that we serve. Our team leverages its expertise in acquisitions and management to provide investors like you with superior risk-adjusted returns while placing a premium on preserving capital. Our mission is to provide property investment and asset management solutions to help investors maximize their returns by investing in high-value multifamily communities. Our philosophy is that we can elevate communities together through this process. And I want to invite you to go check out cfcapllc.com because we have a free ebook that's called The Bottom Line, the 10 ways to increase cash flow in an apartment complex. And I want to tell you that this is a value-packed ebook. So I want to invite you to go check that out right now at cfcapllc.com. I think you're going to get a ton of value just from reading this, whether you apply it to your own business or whether you educate yourself further on what it would look like if you invested with CF Capital. So go check that out at cfcapllc.com. Again, that's cfcapllc.com, and enjoy the rest of the show. Yeah, and it's really, really important. And, it really resonates with me. I was actually thinking, in particular, personally, I was thinking about my goals for this year, right? I'm thinking about the initiatives that I've set for myself. And, I'm a very goal-oriented person. I'm a very driven individual. And I like to surround myself with others who are similarly, setting themselves on a path to create something in their life of meaning, right? Of relevance. And, I was talking to somebody yesterday and we were talking about, think about on the tombstone and it says, the year you were born and the year you died. And then there's a dash in the middle of it, right? And so you think about, well, what's the dash? What do we want that dash to really be all about? And, I think about goals and I've spoken to some of the world's top neuroscientists and, peak performance, experts. And it is about goals. It is about setting directives. It is about being clear on what's your purpose, what's your mission, and what would you like to transform, not only about yourself, but about other people around you? What are you most passionate about? And so, this does resonate with me very deeply. And I know it will for many of our listeners, thinking about too many initiatives, right? Because you get inspired and you think of, well, we're multifaceted. We are multifaceted. We're not just one dimensional. So, but there's a paradox, right? There's a point where you reach perhaps too much. So let's talk about that. I mean, is there a point where you reach too much in terms of goals, or what have you found through your own sort of internal research, through your own experience and otherwise? I mean, is there anything that you'd say to that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, yes, you want to do less but better. I mean, that's sort of still phase one. I still think that's the beginning. That's essentialism. It's a disciplined pursuit of less but better versus the undisciplined pursuit of more. There's always more. You've got to be careful that is not your God, your guiding factor, just more and more and more and more. I mean, that there's got to be something wiser, more centered than that. Success is a very poor teacher, said Bill Gates, right? Like he knows what he's talking about, that you can't let success itself guide you. You need to get back to what is essential, to those few things that are most important. I mean, I still believe all of that. And there's then phase 2, which says, if I have curated the right list, if I am confident that the things that I am pursuing are now the right ones, but it still feels like too much, which I think most working parents, for one example, feel right now en masse. I mean, that's like, as I said, 85%, according to a large survey recently done, published in Harvard Business Review, suggests that they feel their well-being is worse than it was 1 year ago. I mean, that's just one tiny data point. So or I'll give another data point, is that only 9% of people in Britain, according to a YouGov poll, want life to go back to how it was before. So while they don't want this, they don't want that either. They want to move forward to something new and something different. So if you put all of that together, it says, don't just be highly selective, do that first, be an essentialist. But now you've got to find an effortless way of living. And that's not just a nice to have, it's a survival technique in order to be able to thrive in a world that's full of unexpected challenges. And what you can do about this. So I think that, I mean, maybe one of the things I would say to you is, maybe just turning this around for a second, is to ask, well, what is something in your world that is hard for you? It's really important, but you wish was effortless.
It's a great question. I think every day is a challenge in many ways, and in some ways. And I'll also just say back that, I think that those challenges that do feel like you're putting forth a ton of effort, that become effortless later through repetition, and that, is very rewarding. And so I'll say that. But what would I like to be more effortless, these days? I mean,
First thought.
Yeah, let's start there. I would probably say, in terms of the real estate market, I'll say that because we're multifamily real estate investors, and we invest in properties across our region. And I will say that it's challenging to compete in the current marketplace, just due to a bunch of different dynamics. So that's one thing that I would say personally, and obviously that's somewhat external, but how do we get a competitive edge on top of our existing strategy would probably be the first thing.
Let's get that to some specificity. Like,
yeah, what
is the goal you have? There's some gap you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
You want something to be easier. So what does done look like for you?
Yeah, our goal is to make one acquisition every quarter. And so does that make sense?
I think so. And is what you're saying, is it that in the past you are hitting that goal, but it's just harder than you want it to be? Or is it that it's really hard and you're not hitting the goal?
Yeah, we've hit it in the past, and currently we've been outbid on many deals recently, and there's been a lot of competition. So I know a lot of the listeners will be nodding their head and have similar experiences. So this will be really useful. But yeah, I think recently it's just been more competitive because investors who invested in different asset classes pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, who have said, retail, office, I can't see this making a ton of sense anymore. So let's take our capital and put it into a more safe haven. And apartments, multifamily, of course, industrial as well, has been asset classes that have received a lot of that attention. And those prices have, gone up. Those yields have diminished. And so it's made it more challenging for us to make deals work, as well as be awarded opportunities. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. What is your so are you, I assume that you're in like enterprise purchases. You're not talking about a residential purchase.
Correct. Yeah. Apartment communities.
Apartment communities,
multifamily
okay.
Apartment complexes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the thing that's making it hardest for you right now is just this highly competitive market. I was just talking to a realtor in Arizona, and they were saying that there are fewer houses on the market right now than they have ever seen, in literally 30 years. There's just not they're going instantly. The price is going up and up and up. It is feeling a bit bubbly, I think, to those paying attention, right? But it means that you're in this hyper competitive space is what you're describing. Is that
That's right? That's right. Yep.
And so just give me a second, like, why does this matter so much to you?
It matters because, if you think about the macro environment that we live in, you look at capital being created and injected into economies all over the world to a higher degree than they ever have been. And you think about financial safety for people. And of course, our company, we raise private capital and we partner with investors to protect and grow their wealth so that they can use this vehicle as a practical vehicle towards doing more in their life and making more of their life, talking about that dash, right? And so, for us to partner and make these type of acquisitions gives people a greater capacity towards making everything they can within their life, right? So they can have more stability in their income, they can have cash flow, they can build wealth, and they don't have to worry about something like the stock market, which you never know. I mean, on a whim, it could be up 30% or it could be down 30%. And so does that make sense, Greg?
Yeah. What I think I heard you say is that you feel a responsibility to the people you represent, that you go, look, I want to deliver value for you. Yes, I want to, I'm looking for stability in my income too. I'm looking for getting to the next level in my own financial pursuits and goals. But I also feel this fiduciary responsibility to you to deliver great value for your trust in giving me, in giving these funds to me.
That's so true. That's perfect.
What is your current process for discovering these sort of larger rental housing apartment complexes? What's the process for discovering something that's for sale?
Sure. Yeah. We, it's funny because we look at nearly 100 deals before one makes sense. And we've got different brokers in different markets that are our target markets that typically will bring us opportunities, whether they are on or off market. And so we've got a deal flow sort of pipeline that we communicate with our brokers on a very consistent basis. And in fact, like last week, we had like 15 new deals that we started underwriting. And so once those deals come to us, we work with our analysts and our underwriting team, and we decipher all of the details. And myself and my business partner start making decisions. And we say, hey, we're going to go tour this property. Are we going to go tour the comps? Are we going to dig into this opportunity? And then we'll take it to the next level and say, hey, we like this or we don't like this. It's basically a yes or no. And here's where we like it. And when we like it, we make an offer and we start negotiating. So whether we're competing or not, more times than not, recently, we've been competing to a very high degree. So that's what's been going on for us.
Mm-hmm. It's to me, this is interesting. And it's a good, just, let me just pause for a second. Typically, when people are trying to get to the next level of success, what they want to do, what they think they need to do is, well, we've got to work harder. We just got to work harder. We've got to work smarter. Well, particularly, like we got to out execute the competition, and in fact, I was just talking to an owner in the NFL, and he said that I asked him. I said, of all the times you've tried to improve results, how often have you tried to get them to improve results by saying, hey, listen, let's work harder together? And how often have you said, how can we make this easier? And he literally there was a big pause, and he's like, no, listen, Greg, this is 100% the first. I know I never hear anyone say the second. I never think the second. I never say the second. It's just always hustle is the way to get to the next level. And of course, there is something to be said for hustling to getting to the next level. That is
Sure.
true. But I wonder, if we could just ask this question, like, how can we make it much easier? Like I'm gonna like literally put that question to you. Not how can you work a little harder so you can get the deal that the other person didn't because you just did the one more phone call, you just hustled harder. What is the easiest possible way for you to find and secure a great rental complex once a quarter? What's the easiest way to do that?
Well, first of all, I think that this concept resonates with me, and it's been one that we've really focused on too. Is like not being so wound up, not wound so tight, and saying, "Well, wait a minute, this all isn't working. So how can we just stack 5 more, strategies on top of our, our additional strategies?" So it's something that really resonates with me, and saying that, hey, success doesn't have to be so hard, and that trying harder doesn't always get us closer to what we want. So I think that is more from my vantage point, and you tell me what your thoughts are. My vantage point is it is a little bit of an energetic, projection. It's a little bit of a vibration. It's a little bit of a frequency that we emit. And so for me, it's less so, hey, what can I do to focus on myself? But it's more so, how can I add more value to other people? Whether that's just being present. And when I have a conversation, it's building that true relationship and not attaching any desire or extreme need for that to deliver for me, but just saying, hey, what can I do to just give to someone else? So for me, that's how it resonates for me. But what would you say to that, Greg?
Well, I mean, first of all, I love what you're saying, that to me, this alternative way of living and working, this effortless approach really has 3 parts to it. There's the effortless state that helps to achieve effortless action, which helps to achieve effortless results. Those are like 3 concentric circles. You start with the effortless state, as opposed to what are some of the other states you can find yourself in the real estate industry, right? I mean, there's 2 really big ones, right? One is fear and the other is greed. You can definitely get into a fearful state, the fear of missing out. Somebody else got the deal. I have to get that deal right now. And if I didn't, a sense of like, there's no other opportunity. And then on the other side, the greed is so prevalent in many industries, but we all live through the real estate bubble. And that's neither of those are optimal states to be in to actually get great results. They're both a good way to over invest, to overstrain, and then that leads to this over-exertion where you're doing too much and you're running so fast you can hardly think. And so this idea of inversion, instead of how can I work harder to get it, how can I hustle to do it, the principle is to invert, always invert. So instead of saying how can I push myself to get this result, you say, look, is there an easy path? Is there an easier way to achieve this? While everyone else is rushing over here, maybe there's a whole different approach. We don't want to be in a situation where achieving our task is like pushing the boulder up the hill. What we want to do is look for a way to push a boulder down the hill. I'm thinking like Warren Buffett, who says, I'm not looking for 7-foot bars to jump over. I'm looking for 1-foot bars I can step over. That's the most successful investor, in modern history, saying that this is also his phrase, he says, his investment strategy borders on lethargy. When he met with Bill Gates, and Bill Gates was, just packed, his schedule packed, Warren Buffett shows him his hand, pulls out his little paper calendar, and it says, it shows him what his plan is for the week. There's only one appointment, and it was to get his hair cut. That's the whole thing. What is it that Warren Buffett understands about how to become highly successful that maybe the rest of us haven't figured out yet? He's inverting, always invert. See it from this different perspective. So when you faced with a highly competitive situation, don't ask, how do I just, work even harder against my competitors. It's like, is there an easier way? What's the easy path? What's the effortless way to achieve the result I want? You can still go after the result that you want, the thing that you feel is essential, but what if there's a different way of doing it? I'll give you just an example. It's outside of the real estate industry, but it illustrates the point. At Southwest Airline, when they were first starting off, by the way, right, Southwest Airline is a company that give you largest return on your investment over a 30-year period from 1972 to 2002. If you'd put $1 in it, all the companies in the S&P 500, Southwest would have given you the biggest return on investment, which is an unbelievable thing. That's more than Apple or Microsoft or Google, of course, but also Exxon and McDonald's and all of these other. So how did they approach decision making along the way? Well, they were certainly essentialist about it, highly selective, highly strategic, but also there's this great story I came over in researching this, that when they were trying to work out at the time, all the other airlines used a particular ticketing system, and they had to choose whether to spend the $2 million installing that system, just like everybody else had, or to have confusion in their processes they currently had. And as they're leaning towards it, like, well, do we spend the $2 million? It's a lot of money for a low-cost carrier with a young company, or do we just take the hit? And finally, they just said, you know what? Do we care what Continental says a ticket is? And they're like, no, we do not care about what they think it is. We don't have to do it the way the competitor is doing it. And what they came up with is that they would just print, this is your ticket on your receipt when you came to the airport. That was their solution. They saved $2 million, which maybe that sounds a lot, maybe it doesn't, but it's an illustration of invert, always invert. Ask this question. It's like magic, seriously. You figure out what's essential, what's the most important thing I need to do today, what's the priority, and what's the easiest possible way to do it. When you're faced with complexity, when you're faced with something overwhelming, when you're, when you're, I'll give you an example. No, actually, I'll pause. I feel like I'm absolutely just like monologuing now, but I feel like whatever the situation you're in, when you're trying too hard, when you're procrastinating something, I'll give you a small, silly example. I had when I was writing about this, I was looking around I was discovering it really. I was looking around my office and there was this printer that had been sitting there for 2 weeks. We'd replaced a printer at home, and every time I looked at it, it's a hassle. And I'm like, I got to get rid of that. But where do I take it? Do I send it to do I have to take it to like a special place so they can, because it's tech and I don't want to just throw that away. Obviously, that's not responsible. Or do I sell it? I don't know where to sell it. I don't know how much. And it was enough. That all happened in like 5 seconds in my head. It was enough. Every time I saw it, I was just like, okay, I'm not going to deal with that. Right. It was just enough overwhelming that I just wanted to move to something else. And then I asked that question in that moment, what's the easiest way to do it? And as soon as I asked the question, I look up and there's some workers outside, and I thought, well, I wonder if they want it. And so I literally walk outside and say, hey, listen, I got a printer. Would you like it? Yes. Walk inside, I pick it up, I give it to him. Within 2 minutes of asking the question, the problem wasn't just solved intellectually, it was actually executed.
Wow. And
so I just put this question out there. It sounds so small, so tiny, so incremental. But it's a total game changer. It's the closest thing I've ever found in terms of going from successful to very successful. The closest thing I've ever found to magic. You ask the question, suddenly your brain is searching for something that none of your competitors are focused on, because they're just trying to do more of the existing strategy. Your job is to ask, what's the easiest way to do this? And the easiest way is almost certainly not to just compete harder with them.
That's extremely powerful. And, it really resonates with me because I've learned that at any moment in time, our brain is processing millions of pieces of information. And that's why, going back to the earlier part of the conversation, we're talking about rocks or objectives or roles or whatever you want to call it. The mechanism about getting clear on what you're looking to accomplish gives your mind, or the reticular activating system, an opportunity to find opportunities to leverage in your environment or to take action in your environment. And this this question, which is a very powerful question, so thank you for blessing us with this understanding, this simplicity, which is ultimately the most ultimate sophistication that you can really step into. So I really appreciate that. And you think about, this powerful question can give you powerful opportunities to create better results. And it can give you the clarity to see what's available in your environment. Like the simple example you used with Southwest Airlines is a great reminder, because sometimes it's right in front of us. And the same thing with your printer. It's like the person is right there. That person wants what you have. So it gives you the opportunity to find the answer just by asking yourself that question. Is that what you're saying, Greg?
Yes, it is. And what that makes me think of as you go through that is the dominant assumption that if something is valuable, it has to be hard. That dominant assumption means that as successful people who want to become very successful, you also assume, well, the answer is therefore to work very hard. If I'm successful working hard, I need to work very hard in order to become very successful. The logic is pretty sound, other than it isn't how it works at all. So as you move beyond effortless state, as you come back into this more centered place, which I think that question can help you do, you also then have to discover a sort of an effortless way of doing. And so what I want to make clear about this is that effort and motivation, yes, those are good in the early stages, but they are also very limited. You can only work so hard. And when you try to go beyond a certain level of working hard, it starts to be counterproductive. So, we could say that something is, diminishing returns. If you work 6 hours in a day on the things that matter, okay, that's going to give you a certain result. If you work 10 hours, well, you might get a little more value. There's some extra thing, an extra little deal, an extra thing could come, something could work. If you work 20 hours, you're not just going to be in diminishing returns, right? Diminishing returns is where every increment of effort gives you less value, additional value than the last increment of effort. But there's also a place where you go beyond diminishing returns and you are actually in negative returns. And this is a real risk factor, a red flag for people who want to become successful at success. If you find yourself in negative returns, what's happening is that every increment of effort you put in now, you are getting less of your total result. You are actually going to get less results than if you stopped. So when you ever get into negative returns, you better stop right then, because every ounce after that, you are going to reduce your overall effectiveness. You're going to make bad investment decisions. You're going to burn out relationships. You're going to start misreading cues from potential customers or internal staff and so on. And so this problem of overexertion, the great thing here, there's a piece of good news, which is that if you can become aware of overexertion, then simply by doing less, putting in less work, less efforts, we can talk about specific ways to do that, you will get a better result than somebody else. And so I think this is an important, as I say, an important red flag, a moment, a key to be able to catch yourself and come back to center, where you'll actually get more action done by not trying so hard.
I totally agree. And you think about, how effective you are when you work 20 hours a day. I mean, obviously, it's very unlikely that anyone listening is working 20 hours a day, but you get the point, I guess, where Greg is going with this. And, one thing I think is really interesting is when you think about work and striving forward, and a lot of times we're thinking about results in the now or outcomes that we're looking to accomplish, but sometimes we don't think about what we're actually becoming as a result as well in the moment and through that process. And actually, and this is a little bit of a switch gear in terms of what we've been talking about, but I actually was really interested to ask you about this as well, because you actually tweeted this as well. And I normally do not prepare for podcasts just by going through a tweet storm or what have you, but I found this to be Yeah, I liked it a lot. And if you really think about this, you wrote, "Don't learn to do, but do to learn."
Mhm.
And that was just another simple way that I saw that you have flipped a very simple idea and made it very profound. So could you expand upon that and what you meant by that?
Yeah, I can. And I'm going to do something that's like unusual, but if you don't mind, I want to read something to you. Can I?
Please, please.
So, so this is a story that I came across that I just love so much, and it just fits directly with that quote, but it's also true for this idea of effortless action, and this is it. In 1959, a British industrialist named Henry Kramer had a dream of a future where human-powered flight was possible for the masses. Determined to do anything he could to make that dream a reality, he launched the Kramer Prize. Generous rewards meant to incentivize designers to build aircraft that could be powered entirely by a single person. One prize for $50,000 would go to the first person to create an aircraft that could fly a figure eight around two pylons, half a mile apart. Another prize for $100,000 was also offered for the first team to fly an aircraft across the English Channel. Given the aeronautical achievements of the time, constructing what amounted to a workable flying bicycle seemed like a realistic challenge to him. It was, after all, a full century after Orville Wright had made his flight south of Kitty Hawk in North Carolina, and 40 years since the first non-stop transatlantic flight, a full decade before Chuck Yeager had broken the sound barrier, and just a decade later, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin would walk on the moon. But however doable the challenge might have seemed, many talented teams had tried and failed for over 17 years. Enter Paul McCready. Saddled with a huge debt at the time, he didn't have a team at all, save for friends and family, including his young son, whom he enlisted in his test pilot. Meanwhile, his competitors were all well-staffed and well-funded and built big, complex, elegant airplanes. With large span wings, many wooden ribs, and metal and plastic casings. Yet these teams didn't come close to achieving the prize. At first, McCready couldn't figure out why. Then it hit him. Everyone had been working to solve the wrong problem. The real challenge wasn't, I just love this, wasn't to build an elegant aircraft that could do the figure eight on the field around the two pylons. It was to build a large, light aircraft, no matter how ugly it is, that you could crash, then repair, modify, alter, redesign fast. That was when he suddenly realized there is an easy way to do this. So McCready and his son immediately got to work on a model inspired by one of the simplest, most aerodynamic natures. It was bird flight. They called it the Gossamer Condor. It weighed 55 pounds. It looked amateurish, especially compared to all these unbelievably sleek models that all these other teams have built and just made these amazing things. But over the course of just a few months, it was Gossamer Condor. It was like more than 200 flights that they made. I mean, they would fly and crash on the same day, sometimes more times than their competitors would fly and crash in the whole lifetime of the plane.
Wow.
Because they could do it they just literally, they'd crash and they'd go, oh, now we understand. And they'd like quick write down what they'd learned and figure it out. And then they'd experiment again. And all they'd do in between is they'd literally get tape out, stick it back together, and they'd be gone. So within a few minutes, they would have their next test. Whereas in sometimes these other massive planes, these gorgeous things that have been built might take 6 months to go and try and take one more test. And so this was the key. So it was the 223rd flight when the Condor completed the figure eight challenge, won the first Kramer Prize. 2 years later, they would win the second prize, and the Gossamer Albatross successfully crossed the English Channel. The brilliant insight wasn't the advancement of some amazing, flight insight. It was simply that focusing on the elegance and sophistication of the aircraft was actually an impediment to progress. The ugly aircraft that could be crashed, repaired, redesigned was what really gave them the key advantage. And so this is all within the principle of like, don't learn to do to learn. You want to make failure as cheap as possible so that you can learn faster. And I just sort of summarize all of this is it's like you got to have the courage to be rubbish, so that you can make, more mistakes, but cheaply compared to your competitors, so that you are understanding the market faster. You're understanding where to put your investment quicker because you're learning faster than your competition.
And it also gives you the confidence to fail, because failure is feedback, right? Failure is how you can make course corrections. It's how you can improve. Because if you never put yourself in a position to fail, you're never going to know what doesn't work. You're never going to bump into your zone of competence so that you can expand that a bit further. Is that what you're saying, Greg?
Yeah. I mean, if you are in a stable environment where you know pretty much how things are right now and pretty much how they're going to be in the future, then you could do potentially a very long-term learning process. But if you're in an environment that is volatile, that is uncertain, that's ambiguous, then your learning mechanism must be akin to that reality. You wouldn't try to row, like these amazing rowing teams that you have if you were in White Rapids. A row team is exceptionally great. It works for that reality. But if you're in a different reality, you need a different response, a different way of working. And I mean, what is our current reality? What has the last year been? What can we extrapolate from that is likely to be the case for 2021? I mean, everybody, hey, 2021, it's going to be so great. We're going to turn the corner. It's going to be, yeah, but that's not how it actually is. We just have this enormous set of uncertainty still. And that doesn't seem, in my sense, to be going away at all. So we need a mechanism that helps to make action as effortless as possible in this reality.
This is such a powerful conversation, Greg. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm just super grateful for you taking time and for you being here. And I know that we could probably go on for hours and hours and hours, and I want to be really respectful of your time. Maybe we'll even have part two, because I'm so excited about this book. I'm so excited about your work. I'm so excited about your beautiful mind and really being able to dive into the crevices of that and your passion, because I can feel your passion, here. And I really want to be respectful of your time and dive into the rapid fire section of our conversation.
Let's do it.
We call the rare air questionnaire. It's all about being uncommon. It's about making decisions. It's about, asking yourself, hey, what is the way for this to be easy, right? What is the easy path here? And, sometimes that's a tough question to really step back and ask ourselves. But the first question that I have for you, as being a great author yourself and being such an admired writer, I would imagine you're also a big book fanatic like myself. Are there any books that have been very impactful for you over the past few years that you'd point to outside of your work?
Yes, I've enjoyed reading fiction. A man called Uwe is a very interesting, well-written piece. I read Anna Karenina and really enjoyed that. I've loved historical work. John Adams' biography by David McCullough. I just called and spoke to David McCullough's wife just recently. David McCullough's not well now, but loved talking with her and just thanking her for the gift of her and of him. He's been a tremendously impactful for me. So yeah, those are some of the things that I've been reading.
That's awesome. And I love that, because some of the people that I admire most speak about reading fiction and how important that is. And not only just from mind development, but also creativity and learning and, really understanding deep truths as well. So we'll put links in the show notes of those books, as well as, of course, Greg's books on Effortless and Essentialism. And so definitely excited about that. But aside from our discussion today, Greg, what are the top 2 or 3 ways that you elevate your life on a daily basis?
I mean, I mentioned one of them. This it started in the pandemic, going for a walk with my wife every hour for an hour every day. And at first it was a little tricky to do that. We weren't in a good flow about it. And I don't just mean the schedule of it. I mean actually going out and walking and talking. We could get onto all sorts of sensitive subjects or be on a different wavelengths. But we just carried on with it, and it's just become this totally essential practice where we have space to, of course, reconnect. So that's great for marriage and unity and quality of life, because relationships are equal your quality of life. But it's also been great just to have space to think and to talk and to dream. And neither of us bring our phones, not even to take pictures of things, because we just want to actually have a moment outside of it. And it's been, I think it's been the most valuable new practice that I've added in the last year.
That's great. And I love just the thought of separating yourself from the phone to not be tempted to even get that out. And that's been really powerful for me in the bedroom, is leaving that out of the bedroom. And I can't say that I'm perfect, but it's just an energetic change. But thank you for sharing that, Greg. What's the biggest way that you elevate others around you?
Well, something that that we've found as a family in the midst of not COVID, although yes, COVID, but particularly with even this whole the challenge that we went through with her over the last 2 years has been just being this rule. After I complain, I will say something I am thankful for. That's good medicine for you as a person, but it's really good medicine for the people around you. When we complain, we do it so thoughtlessly, so habitually. When I started this rule, I just couldn't believe how much I complained. And I think of myself as a very positive person and forward-looking and hopeful, optimistic, all of those things. And yet I found myself complaining so often when I was around other people. And if you say something you're thankful for, even if it isn't about them, it changes the mood. In fact, we have something even with our children, just to illustrate this point, that we'll say, if it gets too grumpy about whatever, okay, give us 3 things you're thankful for. And I remember my son, Jack, saying, oh, okay, fine. I'm thankful that Dad wants to play this silly game, right?
Right.
So the attitude's all wrong about it, right? That it doesn't matter. Gratitude is that powerful. I mean, by the time he's on number 2 or number 3, he's laughing, we're laughing. Gratitude is more powerful than people give it credit for. It's full of grit. It's a tough principle, and it instantly changes. And so what I've learned from that practice is this simple idea, which is that if you focus on what you have, you will gain what you lack. And if you focus on what you lack, you will lose what you have. So this is a practice with a principle.
That is beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. And I will stack on that just a bit, because I actually completed a 21-day, no complaints, no sarcasm, no criticism challenge. And let me tell you, when I say I completed it, I want to say that I miserably failed at it, because like you, I thought that I was optimistic, and obviously focusing on gratitude and all these things, but it is astounding once you bring the subconscious to the conscious in terms of criticisms, complaints, sarcasm and all these things, how much that shows up. And
so the 3 were criticism, complaints, and sarcasm.
And sarcasm, yes. 21-day challenge.
No, listen here. 21 days is like almost 21 days too long for that challenge.
I know. It's amazing.
What we want is like a 21-minute challenge.
Right. Seriously.
And actually, I really kind of mean that. I wasn't where I started. I love the idea. I wrote it down. But it's like 21 days. I don't know anybody who is going to go 21 days without criticizing, complaining, or being sarcastic. Literally, no. I never met anyone.
No.
I got to think about that. I just was talking to a gentleman last night. His name's Lynn Harding, and he looked after his wife when she was so sick for so long. And I have never heard him complain about that. She's passed away now. And I talked to him last night, and I've never heard him criticize anyone. I have never heard him complain, and I have never heard him be sarcastic. That is really true. He can do the 21-day challenge.
There you go.
He can achieve this. The rest of us mere mortals, we need to start the smaller thing, but it's a great challenge, and I like it for me.
Yeah, I love that. And it's just something to work towards. But I love that you shared that it's about gratitude, right? It's about, thinking through, well, what am I grateful for? Because when I'm thankful and when I think about all the great things that are going on in my life, I can set myself up to receive more. And it kind of goes back to that state we were talking about earlier, the effortless state. If you want to get into that state, I would imagine it has a lot to do with gratitude, right?
Yeah, that's one of the chapters is specifically on how to get into the state. And I think it's the fastest single thing you can do to be in an effortless state is simply say something specific you're thankful for. But it is, the effect is instant.
Yes.
Now, of course, you can get pulled back into a criticism the next second, but in any 2.5 second period, you can switch. Now has a measurement, and the measurement of now is 2.5 seconds. Psychologists have done these studies, and whatever, we can get to that. Neuroscientists and so on, but it's 2 to 3 seconds is now. And that has great opportunity because it means whatever's happened to you in the past, however painful, however challenging, whatever mistakes you've made, everything, that's the past. In this next 2 to 3 seconds, you can change it. And if you can step into that with gratitude, you are instantly now in a new moment. You become, now comes something new, homos, I think is what it's called. It's a new man, whole new being. Now is this idea that you get a new chance in every second, and every 2 or 3 seconds. And I think that's a perfect moment to leave it on. It's
that's
delight
exactly
to be with you.
No, that's exactly right. And it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you, Greg. Is there any parting thoughts or words of wisdom that you'd share with Elevate Nation today?
I just really genuinely appreciate being here, and the people listening and watching being here, because they're investing in not just in themselves, but in creating and designing something important for their future and people after them.
That's exactly right. And I'm just extremely grateful to have had this opportunity to speak with you today, Greg. I really look forward to continuing the conversation. And I want to encourage Elevate Nation to check out gregmckeown.com. And, look him up on LinkedIn, look him up on Instagram, look him up on Twitter. We will put links in the show notes of where you can find Greg everywhere. And of course, find his book, Effortless. It is available on Amazon. It's available everywhere books are sold. And you'll definitely want to pick up Essentialism as well if you have not done already. But Greg, I just really, really thank you for being here on the show today.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Elevate Nation, we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Elevate. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to elevate your results by taking immediate action on what you learned. For more, visit elevatepod.com.